The scent of Isabella's expensive diptyque candles, fig, not vanilla because vanilla was common, hung thick in the air, cloying and artificial. I settled deeper into the buttery soft leather of my son's Chesterfield sofa, the one with the sage green upholstery his mother had chosen a lifetime ago. "I could make my famous turkey this year," I said, the words feeling familiar and comfortable in my mouth. "The one with the orange and thyme brine. Your mother, she used to say it was the only thing that made the holidays smell right. Remember?" The words lingered in the perfectly climate-controlled room, a fragile bubble of memory in a house that increasingly felt like a museum of someone else's life. My son, David, shifted beside me. The light from their obscenely large, professionally decorated Christmas tree caught the platinum of his wedding band. His shoulders, encased in a cashmere sweater I'd bought him, tense almost imperceptibly. "Dad," he began, his voice strained. He couldn't meet my eyes, choosing instead to study the veining in the Carrara marble coffee table, the one I'd written a check for when his wife, Chloe, decided their old one clashed with the new aesthetic. "What is it, son?" I prompted, a cold dread beginning to uncoil in my stomach. He took a sharp breath. "Look, about Christmas, you won't be welcome here this year." The air left my lungs. It was such a bizarre, brutal phrase. Not welcome. I blinked. Sure, I had misheard. "I'm sorry? What do you mean, not welcome? David, I'm your father." I know. It's just, Chloe's parents are flying in from Connecticut. They have a very specific way of doing the holidays, very traditional, and they'd prefer if the celebrations were just immediate family. Immediate family. The two words landed like separate blows. I looked around the room again, truly seeing it. The silk drapes that had replaced the ones Maria and I helped them hang. The wide plank oak floors, sourced from a reclaimed barn in France, paid for with the equity from my own home. The state-of-the-art sound system that had been my birthday gift to him last year. Every brick, every fixture, every throw pillow was a monument to my financial devotion, and now I was being told I didn't qualify as immediate family within its walls. "Their specific way," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "And what way is that, David? Do they prefer their turkey dry? Their eggnog without a splash of bourbon? Do they enjoy conversations that don't include the man who paid for the roof over their daughter's head?" "Dad, please," he pleaded, finally looking at me. His eyes were wide with a mixture of shame and defiance. "Don't make this harder. You know how they are. It's just easier this way. We can do something the weekend after, just you and me. We'll get a tree, decorate it like we used to." "The weekend after," I said, flatly, as if Christmas was a dentist appointment that could be rescheduled. The fantasy of a nostalgic tree trimming with my chastened son evaporated. He wasn't chastened. He was complicit. I stood up, my knees protesting. 8 years of carrying this family on my back had taken its toll. "I see." "Dad, wait!" But I was already moving, a sleepwalker navigating a familiar dream that had just turned into a nightmare. I passed the gallery wall of family photos, where my face grew smaller and more distant with each passing year. I passed the walk-in coat closet that held Chloe's collection of Montclair puffer jackets, each one costing more than my monthly grocery bill. My hand found the solid brass doorknob, cold and unyielding. I turned back to my son, who remained frozen on the edge of the sofa, a boy trapped in a man's expensive cage. "Son," I said, my voice devoid of all the warmth I felt for the memory of the boy he had been. "Tell Chloe's parents I said Feliz Navidad." The winter air of their upscale Seattle neighborhood hit me like a physical slap. I didn't look back. I heard the soft, definitive click of the door closing behind me, a sound more final than any slam. The lock engaging was the period at the end of the sentence of our relationship. I sat in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old Ford F-150, the engine off, watching the multicolored lights twinkle in the windows of the multi-million-dollar homes on the cul-de-sac. Each light seemed to mock me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. David, no doubt, ready to offer some pathetic, face-saving excuse. I let it go to voicemail.
Instead, I turned the key, the truck's engine roaring to life with a satisfying growl that echoed the one in my own chest. I drove away from the curated perfection of Queen Anne Hill, leaving behind the ghost of the man I had been, the generous fool who believed love was a currency that could be deposited in a bank of familial duty and withdrawn in times of need. The heater whirred, fighting the December chill. As I navigated the streets toward my own modest home in Ballard, the numbers began to scroll through my mind, a relentless, damning accounting. The down payment, $85,000. My entire share of the profit from selling the business Maria and I had built from nothing. The monthly mortgage supplements, $3,200 for 4 years. $153,600. The kitchen renovation when Chloe decided she needed a Lockhorn new range and a Sub-Zero fridge to host properly. $55,000. The temporary help when David was between ventures. Another $40,000 over 2 years. The property taxes, the insurance premiums, the new Tesla so Chloe wouldn't have to endure the smell of public transit. I'd stopped adding it up after it passed the $350,000 mark. It was too painful. That was Maria's legacy, our retirement, the security we'd scraped and saved for through decades of hard work. All of it, funneled into a life where I was now an unwelcome guest. I pulled into my driveway, the cracked concrete a stark contrast to their imported cobblestones. The porch light was out again. I'd been meaning to fix it, but there was never any money left over after their emergencies. Inside, the house was silent. It had been silent since Maria's laughter left it 8 years ago. It was the silence of absence, but now, for the first time, it began to feel like the silence of possibility. My phone rang. Not David this time. Chloe. The screen glowed with her name. Perfect. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. Arthur! Her voice was a master class in condescending sweetness, the tone she used when asking me to cover the cost of her equestrian club membership. David told me about your little chat. I'm sure you're feeling a bit sensitive, but we need to be adults about this. I leaned against my Formica kitchen counter, saying nothing. My parents, she continued undeterred, are very particular. They come from old money, Arthur, Greenwich money. They have certain expectations about decorum, about conversation topics. They summer in Nantucket, for God's sakes. They're just not used to, well, to your kind of exuberance. All that loud Latin music and those spicy casseroles you bring. I remained silent, letting her dig her own grave. It's not about you personally, she lied smoothly. It's about ambiance, Arthur. My father is a published historian. My mother sits on the board of the Met. They discuss Proust and geopolitical theory. What would you even talk about? Your years laying tile? It would just be awkward for everyone. My kind of exuberance, I finally said, my voice low and steady. You mean the food you claimed to love when you first started dating David. The paella you said was better than any you'd had in Spain. The arepas you begged me to make every Sunday. That was different, she snapped, the sweetness evaporating. We were being polite. We were including you in our world. But this is my family's tradition. It's about refinement, Arthur, breeding, something your late wife, sweet as she was, understood. She knew how to stay in the background.
The line went dead cold. She had invoked Maria. "What did you just say about my wife?" My voice was a shard of ice. "I'm just saying she knew her place. She didn't try to force her way into situations where she didn't belong. She had a quiet dignity about her." Maria, I said, each word measured and precise, had more dignity, class, and strength in her smallest finger than your entire bloodline will ever possess. She built an empire from a single tile sample and a second-hand truck. What has your father ever built besides a portfolio of other people's investments? "How dare you?" she hissed. "My father is a pillar of the community. Your wife was a tradeswoman who married above her station. At least she had the sense to be quiet about it." The line went dead. She had hung up. I stood there, my hand clenched so tightly around the phone I thought the screen might crack. The quiet of my kitchen was no longer empty. It was charged, focused. The last vestige of sentimental attachment I had to that woman, to that version of my son, evaporated. The scales had finally fallen from my eyes. I walked to the battered oak desk in the corner of my living room, a relic from my first office. I pulled out the thick manila folder I had been compiling and avoiding for years. Bank statements, wire transfer receipts, loan documents, credit card bills, a paper trail of my own financial evisceration. It was time to stop the bleeding. The documents spread across my kitchen table like a prosecutor's evidence. I worked with a methodical calm I hadn't felt in years. This was a problem I understood. Numbers, logistics, consequences. I started with the biggest leak, the mortgage. $3,200 every month, like clockwork, from my account to theirs. I logged into my banking portal, the blue and white interface familiar and impersonal. A few clicks brought me to the Manage Automatic Transfers page. There it was. Transfer to Wells Fargo, account 8923, $3,200 monthly. My finger hovered over the mouse. For a moment, a flash of the old guilt surfaced. What if they can't make the payment? What if they lose the house? Then I saw Chloe's sneering face in my mind, heard her words, "Your kind of exuberance." I clicked Cancel Transfer. A confirmation dialog box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" "Yes," I said aloud to the empty room. "I am very sure." I clicked Confirm. It was done. Just like that. 5 years of financial servitude ended with a single mouse click. A wave of visceral relief washed over me, so powerful it was almost dizzying. Next month, for the first time in half a decade, my account wouldn't be gutted. But that was just the beginning. The mortgage was the symptom. The disease was their entire entitled existence, funded by me. I pulled out a fresh notepad. Asset list, I wrote at the top. 1. The house, the crown jewel. I knew they were heavily leveraged. Their combined income couldn't cover the mortgage and their lifestyle. That was the whole reason for my monthly injections. 2. Social standing. Chloe's family's reputation in their narrow, privileged social circle was their currency. It was fragile, built on perception and old money snobbery. 3. David's complicity. My son was weak, but he wasn't evil. He was embarrassed, trapped, and morally bankrupt. That could be useful. Plan of action, I wrote next. Phase 1. Financial withdrawal. Cancel all support. Let the foundation crack. Complete. Phase 2. Intelligence gathering. Understand their vulnerabilities completely. Phase 3. Public reckoning. Destroy the illusion they've so carefully built. Phase 4. Offer David a choice. A path back, but on entirely new terms. I gathered up the financial documents, carried them to the fireplace, and lit a match. I watched 5 years of my life, of Maria's legacy, turn to ash and smoke. It was the most cathartic bonfire I'd ever made. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Dad, we need to talk about what Chloe said. She's upset. Can we please just smooth this over?" I didn't reply. Instead, I poured 2 fingers of a truly excellent añejo tequila I'd been saving for an occasion that never came. I raised the glass to Maria's photograph on the mantel.
The smoothing over is done, my amour. Now comes the roughing up.
The next morning, my phone rang at precisely 10:15 a.m. Chloe. The audacity was breathtaking. "Arthur," she began. No preamble, no apology. "I need you to pick up my parents from SeaTac. Their flight from JFK gets in at 3:05 p.m. They'll be at Delta baggage claim." I let the silence stretch, savoring it. "Chloe, did the events of yesterday somehow escape you?" "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "This is about practicality. They need a ride. You have a truck that can handle their luggage. It's the least you can do after that disgraceful performance last night." "The least I can do," I repeated softly. "Yes, and for God's sake, wear something presentable, that blazer you wore to the opera that one time. And wash the truck. My father notices things like that." The line went dead. She hadn't asked, she'd commanded. She viewed me not as a person, but as a resource, one that had briefly malfunctioned, but was now expected to resume service. I looked at the clock. 10:20 a.m. Plenty of time. I made myself a full breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast, something I never allowed myself on a weekday. I read the newspaper cover to cover. I took a long, leisurely shower. I was, for the first time in years, the master of my own time. At 3:05 p.m., I was not at SeaTac. I was at my local hardware store, buying a new porch light fixture and a gallon of paint. My phone began to buzz in my pocket. I ignored it. By 3:30 p.m., it had buzzed 12 times. I turned it off. I spent the afternoon installing the new light and painting my front door a cheerful, defiant shade of blue. The physical labor felt good, honest. I was fixing my own house with my own hands for myself. The pounding on my door started at 6 p.m. It wasn't a knock, it was an assault. I opened it to find a trio of fury standing on my newly swept porch. Charles Van Horn, Chloe's father, his face a mottled purple, stood front and center. Eleanor, her mother, stood ramrod straight behind him, her expression one of pure, undiluted contempt. Chloe lurked behind them, her eyes blazing. "What in the absolute hell is wrong with you?" Charles roared, trying to shoulder his way past me. I stood my ground, blocking the doorway. "We waited at that airport for 2 hours! 2 hours! We had to hire some gypsy cab that smelled of curry to drive us to our daughter's house. Do you have any idea the inconvenience?" "The humiliation," Eleanor added, her voice like shards of glass. "You embarrassed me. You stranded my parents." I looked at them, these three entitled monuments to arrogance, and felt nothing but a cold, clear calm. "I told you weren't welcome," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through their sputtering rage. "You made it abundantly clear that my presence, my car, and what was it, Chloe? My spicy casseroles?" Charles's eyes bulged. "You disrespectful little man, after everything our family has done for you. Taking you in, treating you like what, Charles?" I interrupted. "Like an ATM? You're right, you have taken. And I'm done giving." Eleanor's lip curled. "This isn't about money. This is about basic human decency, something you clearly lack. You will apologize. You will make this right." "Or what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Or you will regret it," Charles said, taking a step closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "I have friends in this city, Flores. Powerful friends. I can make your life very, very difficult. I will ruin you." I held his gaze, unblinking. "That sounds an awful lot like a threat, Charles. I'd be careful." "It's a promise," he spat. I smiled, a thin, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Good to know. The conversation is over. Get off my property." I closed the door in their stunned purple faces and turned the deadbolt. The sound was final. Through the window I watched them storm back to their rented Lincoln Navigator, still shouting at each other. "Powerful friends. Ruin you." The words hung in the air.
The war was no longer cold. They had just declared it, and I was more than ready to fight. 3 days later, the article appeared in the Pacific Northwest section of the Seattle Times. The headline was a masterpiece of character assassination. Local businessman strands elderly couple at SeaTac amid holiday travel chaos. There was my picture, an unflattering, years-old photo from my company's website. The story painted a devastating picture. According to sources close to the family, I had volunteered to pick up the elderly Van Horns and then callously abandoned them without warning during a peak travel period, leaving them vulnerable and distressed. Charles was quoted extensively talking about the agony of uncertainty and the fear for their safety in a crowded airport. Eleanor lamented the breakdown of common courtesy and family values. There was pointed mention of my recent erratic behavior and increasing isolation. It was brilliant, and it was all a lie. The weather was clear and mild. There was no chaos. They were not vulnerable. They had multiple credit cards and smartphones. But the narrative was set. I was the unstable, cruel villain. They had struck the first public blow, aiming straight at my reputation. For a full hour I sat with the newspaper, the hot coffee in my mug growing cold. The initial shock gave way to a cold, simmering fury. Then that, too, subsided, replaced by something far more potent, a focused, strategic resolve. They wanted to play this game in the public arena. Fine. But they had made a fatal error. They had underestimated their opponent. They thought I was a simple, unconnected tradesman. They didn't know about the contacts I'd made over 40 years in business. They didn't know about the favors I was owed. They didn't know that I understood the oldest rule of conflict: never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. I went to my desk. The intelligence-gathering phase was now urgent. Charles Van Horn thought his powerful friends would protect him. He was about to learn that my friends were more powerful and far more loyal. A few calls were made, to an old client who was now a senior editor at the Times, to a former subcontractor whose brother was a forensic accountant, to a lawyer I'd done a massive, discounted job for years ago who specialized in defamation and financial law. Within 48 hours, I had a dossier. Charles Van Horn's old money was largely a myth. His wealth was heavily leveraged, built on risky margin loans and a series of speculative investments that had recently turned south. He was financially vulnerable. The powerful friends were mostly golfing buddies and fellow board members at his exclusive club, a network built on mutual back-scratching, not unbreakable loyalty.
Most importantly, my lawyer friend had an idea. "The mortgage payments, Arthur," he said. "You've been making them for years with no formal agreement. In the eyes of the law, that could be construed as a gift. But if we can demonstrate undue influence, or if we can prove it was understood as a loan, we might have leverage. But we need something, a written demand." I knew what I had to do. I drafted a letter. It was not a lawsuit, not yet. It was something far more devastating in its simplicity. A formal, notarized demand for the repayment of all funds transferred to David and Chloe over the past 5 years, totaling $387,420, with a repayment schedule to be negotiated within 30 days. I sent it via certified mail. The trap was set. The response was not long in coming. It was not David or Chloe who called, but Charles. His voice on the phone was a low, menacing growl, stripped of all its previous faux civility. "Flores, you have some nerve. This extortion attempt ends now. You will withdraw this absurd demand, and you will issue a public retraction of your behavior, or I will not only bury you in legal fees, I will make sure you never work in this state again." "It's not extortion, Charles," I said calmly. "It's an accounting. And as for work, I've been retired for 5 years. You might want to check your facts before making threats."
How's your margin call looking, by the way? Heard the tech portfolio took a nasty hit? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I had struck a nerve. His financial vulnerability was his greatest fear. You have no idea what you're talking about, he finally hissed. But the bluster was gone, replaced with raw panic. I think I do. 30 days, Charles? The clock is ticking. I hung up. The next move was mine, and I knew exactly when to make it. According to the meticulously detailed Christmas Eve dinner invitation I had accidentally seen on Chloe's public Instagram, the event started at 7 p.m. The guest list was a who's who of their social circle. The bank president Charles was trying to impress, the gallery owner Eleanor curated for, their neighbors, their so-called friends. I arrived at 7:45 p.m. The house was ablaze with light. Through the large dining room window I could see them all, seated around the long table, laughing, toasting, enjoying the life I had financed. I parked down the street and waited. At 8 p.m., just as the main course would be served, I made my move. I walked up the driveway, not to the front door, but to the garage. I knew the code. It was David's birthday. I keyed it in, the door whispering open. I slipped inside and stood in the shadows, listening to the chatter from the dining room. I heard Charles holding forth telling some inflated story. I heard Chloe's tinkling laugh. I took a deep breath and stepped into the doorway. The conversation died instantly. 12 faces turned to me, forks frozen in mid-air. The expressions were a study. Shock, confusion, embarrassment, and, on the faces of Charles, Eleanor, Chloe, and David, pure, unadulterated horror. "Arthur," David gasped, standing up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," I said calmly. "I thought I'd stop by since I wasn't welcome on the actual holiday. I come bearing gifts." I held up my briefcase. Chloe was white. "Get out," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "In a moment," I said. I walked around the table, placing a thick, bound packet in front of each guest. "Please, don't let me interrupt your meal. I just thought you should all have the full context for your celebrations." "What is the meaning of this?" boomed a large man I recognized as the bank president. "This," I said, tapping the packet in front of him, "is the cost of admission to this dinner. It's a detailed accounting of every dollar I've spent on this house, this food, and the lifestyle of your hosts over the past 5 years. Nearly $400,000. A wave of gasps and murmurs swept the table. People began to leave through the packets. "He's lying!" Charles shouted, jumping to his feet. "The man is unstable. He's been harassing us. There's an article in the Times." "Ah, yes, the article," I said, nodding. "The one you had your golf buddy plant. The one about me abandoning you in a holiday travel chaos that didn't exist. The guests might find the weather report from that day interesting. It's on page 5. Sunny, 48 degrees. Quite the chaotic storm." People were now avidly reading, their faces shifting from curiosity to dawning disgust. "This is outrageous," Eleanor cried. "This is a private matter." "It stopped being private when you went to the newspaper, Eleanor," I said, my voice hardening. "It stopped being private when you tried to publicly destroy my reputation because I refused to be your unpaid chauffeur, after you told me my spicy casseroles and working-class conversation weren't good enough for your Christmas table." I turned to address the whole table. "They took my money, my late wife's legacy, my retirement fund, to build this life, and the only condition was that I be allowed to love my son and be a part of his life. But that was too high a price for them. I was good enough to fund their dreams, but not good enough to sit at their table." I looked directly at David, who looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. "I'm done funding this hypocrisy. The money train has reached its final stop. The demand letter they received is real.
They have 27 days left to respond. The room was in an uproar. The bank president stood up, his face like thunder. "Charles, is this true? You've been taking this kind of money from your father-in-law?" It's being misrepresented," Charles spluttered. "The bank statements are right there, Harold," I said to the president. "Check the account numbers. They don't lie." I had done what I came to do. The seeds of doubt were sown. Their perfect, glittering facade lay in ruins around them, shattered by the cold, hard truth of bank statements and canceled checks. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner," I said, turning to leave. "I believe the turducken is from Metropolitan Market. I would know. My American Express card paid for it." I walked out the way I came, through the garage, leaving behind a silence so profound it was louder than any argument. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a weary, hollow sadness. But beneath it, solid and unshakable, was the knowledge that justice, however messy, had finally been served. The letter from the bank came in February. Notice of default. 3 missed payments. Foreclosure proceedings would begin in 90 days. The call started again, desperate now. David, crying, begging, saying he'd finally seen the light, that Chloe had moved out, that her parents had cut them off completely after the Christmas Eve debacle had vaporized their social standing. I listened. I heard the genuine panic in his voice, the fear, the regret. He came to my house, a broken man. He looked at the new furniture, the fresh paint, a sense of order and self-respect I had reclaimed. "He lost everything, Dad," he whispered. "No," I corrected him gently. "You lost what I was giving you. You still have your health, your education, and a chance to build something for yourself. Something real." "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "I already have," I said, and it was true. The anger was gone. "But forgiveness isn't a blank check, David. It doesn't mean I'm going to fix this for you. The house is gone. You need to deal with that. You need to get a job, a real one, not a venture. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I will, I promise. I'm so sorry, Dad. For all of it. For Mom, I disrespected her memory. I disrespected you." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." "The question is, what are you going to do now?" We talked for a long time. Not as a banker and a debtor, but as a father and a son, perhaps for the first time in a decade. I laid out my terms. There would be no more money, ever. Our relationship would be rebuilt slowly from the ground up, based on mutual respect, not financial dependency. He would have to be the one to call, to visit, to make the effort. He agreed. It was a start. I heard through the grapevine that Charles and Eleanor Van Forn had retreated to their Connecticut estate, their reputation in Seattle in tatters. Chloe was living with them, reportedly suing David for divorce. I sold my house in Ballard. It held too many ghosts. I bought a small modern condo near the water with a view of the Olympics. I started traveling. I went to Spain, to Mexico, to places Maria and I had always talked about seeing. One afternoon, sitting on my balcony, watching the ferries cross the Sound, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David, a picture of a small, messy apartment, and a caption, "My first place. It's not much, but the mortgage is all mine. Dinner Sunday? I'm cooking." I smiled and typed back, "I'll bring the wine." It wasn't a happy ending. Those are for fairy tales. It was a new beginning, forged in the fire of hard truth and earned respect. The arrogant were punished, justice in its own imperfect way had been restored, and I had finally, after years of being a guest in other people's lives, come home to myself. If you enjoyed the story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the video on the screen now. Thank you for listening.